I don't think AI is going to replace HR. You cannot have human resources without the human component to it. What AI will do, and I think can do for those of us who really embrace it, is amplify our impact within our organization because it's helping us accelerate things that often take a lot of time.
They keep telling us that it's all over for HR. The age of AI is upon us, and that means HR should be prepared to be decimated. We reject that message. The future of HR won't be handed to us. Instead, it'll be defined by those ready to experiment, adopt, and adapt. Future Proof HR invites these builders to share what they're trying, how it's going, what they've learned, and what's next. We are committed to arming HR with the AI insights to not just survive, but to thrive. Hello and welcome to the Future Proof HR podcast, where we explore how forward-thinking HR leaders are preparing for disruption and redefining what it means to lead people in a changing world. I'm your host, Thomas Kunjappu, CEO of Cleary. Today's guest is Jennifer Albert, Chief People Officer at Extensiv. Over the last 13 plus years, Jennifer has helped organizations scale through rapid growth, acquisitions, and industry downturns. Her expertise spans culture and engagement, talent management, leadership development, compensation, and org design. And at Extensiv specifically, she's led the company through a significant reorg and is now doubling down on development through career tracks and concept of micro promotions and AI-enabled learning for managers. So excited to dig into that and a lot more with you, Jennifer. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Thomas.
Tell me a little bit about your career arc, if we can just get started there. Like, how did you go become a chief people officer?
Oh gosh, quite by accident probably. So I started my early years and went to college for psychology and thought I was going to be a licensed clinical social worker or a psychologist. And while in my bachelor's degree, I was working in the business field and got introduced to the world of HR and then thought, huh, I think I really like business and I think I can take this psychology degree and maybe marry the two together. So then I decided that was what I was going to do, and I went for my MBA, stayed working in business, and decided that HR and people was where I wanted to go, and the rest was kind of history after I got my foot in the door and there.
Oh, so just to clarify, so you got into the people side post MBA, or you were already doing that beforehand?
I was already in
Oh,
it during my MBA, but I was not, like, fully into the position yet. It was more doing a double
ah,
role, a little bit of HR, but a little bit of business operations while I was getting my MBA.
got it. There's a lot of change that you've managed in this time. Now let's talk about the biggest thing that is impacting people in this point in late 2025, which is about AI, right? And there's a lot of anxiety, honestly, out there across workforces, across industries. How do you think about that? Or do you sense the anxiety yourself in like across your peers, the various stakeholder groups that you're working with, maybe even in yourself?
Yeah, I don't know so much within myself or my org as it being a fear as much as curiosity and how do we use AI and how does AI, replace what people do or replaces what they can't do. And to me, I think that's the biggest thing I've seen with every tech development that's ever happened. There's always this quote unquote fear of the unknown.
Right.
And I think as we adapt and we get more familiar with things, that fear that some people probably have will turn more into curiosity of how do I harness this and how is it helping me be better and more efficient and do the things that really matter and impact my business.
So curiosity is a great place to start from. Any early lessons then from that period of curiosity or from that perspective of point of view?
Yeah, I think in terms of lessons, it's really around how do you get started? And I think that's what probably scares people the most about AI is just not knowing where you want to be with it. And so when I think about like how do you get started, if you're looking at it from a business perspective, that probably seems more scary. So start in your personal life one of your chat agents and have it meal prep for you. Have it plan a trip you've been wanting to take. Maybe do some quick research. Like that's a really low stakes way
Right.
to start getting yourself comfortable with just using the tools that exist. And then from there, I think if you're wanting to put it into your business, which I should also say you should be, if you don't start using AI, you're going to get behind. Do that if you're not. But from there, pick a low risk way within your organization. Figure out a need that your team has or your organization has or a workflow, just one thing. And play around with it. Challenge your team to play around with it. Pick an experiment, have everyone go off and utilize a chat agent for the same problem, and then come back together as a team and look at the differences. What chat agent were you using? What prompts were you giving it? What was the output? Pick one of those and then go back as a team and continue training that AI agent to get the outcome that you're looking for that also fits the tone and the culture of your organization, and I think you can do that in a lot of really low stakes ways to start dipping your toes into AI.
So we're going to talk much more about this. Thank you for some of these great examples about AI, right? But I would love to talk a little bit about an interrelated topic, right? But specifically around the relationship between like HR and the C suite more broadly. So I know AI is coming up in board and leadership conversations, but that's now. And I think a few years ago, a lot of the conversation, like at least for you, was about doing a major reorg. Could you share a little bit about the yeah, what that process looked like and any lessons learned about how to show up as an HR leader in these times of crisis?
Yeah, so we had a lot of change. So the reorg was one of those things. We also did 3 acquisitions. We did a company-wide rebrand. That's a lot of change. It is a lot of change across the entire organization. And I think it's a few ways in terms of, like, how HR shows up because 'cause we're obviously at the forefront of these conversations. We're deeply involved, whether it's a reorg or you're acquiring a company. And our purpose there is to really help lead that process and bring stability, bring clarity, bring that people first lens to all the decisions that are being made because you're operating at a really challenging environment for everybody, especially if you're talking about something like a reorg. We're talking about people, and that impacts everybody. We are all and we're not immune to that. And for HR, you've got to bring clear goals and understand what those clear goals are, but then you've got to bring that people lens and have the clarity of what those end goals are to make sure you're asking the right questions. We're considering options and alternatives, and we're cultivating space to have some really hard conversations while also being empathetic and doing things that align with our company culture and our values and the things that we believe in and our goals as a company.
So I would love to dig in a bit more about this. Let's and really, it's yeah, like you said, it's really just we're talking about times of massive change, right? And change management. How early in the process do you think HR can make an influence? Whether we're talking about reorgs, M&A, brand, like when should you be getting engaged, and how should you be influencing?
You should be getting engaged, from the very beginning. So outside of CE knowing and your board knowing, right behind that should be HR, your CFO, depending on what it is, but you've got to be involved from the beginning, or I think you're gonna miss out on some really important people components to whatever the changes that you're about to go through. It doesn't matter if it's an acquisition, it doesn't matter if it's a reorg or a rebrand. If you don't bring HR in at the beginning, you're gonna be behind and probably have to do a little bit of rework there.
Let's talk about M&A, for example, right? When do you think and how do you think in an early stage in the process, really, if you're fully engaged at that level, what kind of influence and outcomes can you drive? And you also talk about rework. So maybe part of it's actually about just making the right decision, even going through with the M&A or not, or
Yeah.
knowing full well what you're buying.
Yeah, totally. So I think if we're talking specifically about M&A, of course, the company products and all of those things, it's either gotta be a complement or you're taking market share and the business component has to make sense. And that's where your CEO, CFO come into play. And then I think when HR comes into play when you're talking about M&As is really starting to understand some of the cultural components to both organizations and what type of hiccups could you potentially have along the way of integrating teams? There's obviously the whole benefits and payrolls and systems, and those things all matter, but they're all fixable. Like, you can integrate those. Maybe you're running systems at different times, but those are table stakes things. You're gonna just have to go through that regardless. But when it comes to the cultural side, you really have to look at what information you have about a potential company that you're acquiring and get a sense of that, get a sense of the team, what matters to them. A lot of times you're gonna have to do that from their top layer of leadership without actually meeting those team members, which can be hard. But then think you start having conversations of how can you successfully integrate people together. And what I have seen just watching businesses do this out in the world is sometimes the acquirers just, "Okay, you're absorbed into our company and here's how we do things." And I don't think that's the right approach. I don't think you can put a blanket across every organization. And I think finding ways that you can integrate new team members, that you can also maybe bring some of their culture into your organization, the good pieces that matter to them. And that I think helps everyone come together and prevent having an us and them scenario. Like, one of the things we did was we would give our newly acquired companies, we'd give them new hire buddies. And so they'd have someone within the organization that they could just go talk to and ask questions, understand norms, learn the lay of the land. And I think those things, they just matter because you're developing human connection.
Yeah, I think I heard you say like the cost overruns associated with the things that HR is typically empowered to look at, which is benefits, compensation structure, and systems. It's there could be some, but there's a ceiling there, right? That's not so high. But when cultures clash or specific organizations within the new acquired an organization that is not actually meshing well, it's almost it starts to put the whole deal thesis at risk, right, from a cost overrun and downside perspective. So you have a shot to make a real influence up there. I want to push this thought a little bit though. So do you think that there's real influence capacity for the function, and we're talking about even like the future, right? As we think about future proofing HR for like for CPOs, CHROs to be at their basically green lighting, red lighting deals. Do you think that should be a part of the norm? Do you believe that will be as we go into the future?
Yeah, I think it already is, and it has to be. For the most part, I personally haven't experienced red flags where we're like, we can't do this. These teams are not going to work well. But I think in scenarios where that could potentially exist, if organizations aren't asking that question, they're taking a big risk. If you're bringing two companies together that have extremely different cultures, you've got to think about how you're going to run those. And maybe it's a parent company and they're gonna continue running the businesses parallel as 2 separate things, and that's gonna work. But if you're looking at, "Hey, we're gonna actually merge these together," might wanna do a little bit more digging on that type of an integration just so you know what you're getting yourself into.
So we went deep into M&A as like an example of change management that you're doing as an HR leader. Now, we also talk about reorgs and touched on a brand reset is there's a significant change management there as well. With the advent of AI, how much of a change management exercise is it in relation to these other ones that we just went through? What are some similarities, or is there something unique or different from a change management perspective?
Yeah, I think from a change management perspective, you can apply some similar concepts to anything that involves change because usually the thing about change that freaks people out is uncertainty. And the more clarity, transparency, setting the example of how we're doing something, so using AI as an example, letting people see that you're using it and you're talking about it. When you get the trust and transparency, everything else is gonna follow along with change. But it's people get in trouble when they don't do those things. It's when they spark a change on someone or a company in their teams and they're not communicating and conversations are happening behind closed doors and nothing gets communicated out. So when you're lacking transparency, you're lacking trust. And if you're lacking trust, you're gonna have a really hard time with the change management side of things.
So how how do you build trust? And this is if you were to Google dealing with HR Reddit and just take a look through. what the average person thinks about in their experiences, right? Not there's room for improvement, at least in the perceptions for the function, like overall. Yeah, how do you go about building trust? And it's not even just for you as an individual, as a leader of the function, but also for everyone that's representing the function internally to all your stakeholders, right? Any thoughts on building trust?
Yeah, and I'd even go so far as to say outside of HR and HR stakeholders, people managers in general, right? For the tail is out of time is management and leadership, and it's kind of been this separate, well, leadership has said to do this. And so I think
Mm,
this trust component goes beyond just HR. Certainly HR is involved in it. You think back to your point, the Reddit, the 90s and early 2000s, HR looked very different and we certainly got a stigma around us then. But I think in terms of building, maintaining trust, it goes back to the transparency component. When you have transparency, you build the speed of trust and you build connection with people. And so, one of the things, just using our reorg as the example that we did, we needed to make sure that we had trust and connection within our teams. And we really leaned into transparency. So,
mm,
sharing short-term goals, sharing our metrics, sharing long-term goals. If there was news on those things, good or bad, we shared it. We did fireside chats, town halls. We have leaders that have office hours. We did people leader meetings. And the entire purpose of all of this was to create these smaller intentional spaces
mm.
where leaders within our organization could be meeting with these small groups and really be in a place of vulnerability to be asked hard questions and have to answer hard questions. And the whole reasoning behind that is for communication. When people can communicate and can ask hard questions and get answers, whether they like an answer or not, if they have the clarity and understand why and what's happening, that creates meaningful conversations and that creates an environment where people have the ability to have trust with each other because they're seeing you as a person. They're able to have these tough conversations. You're being vulnerable as a leader, and those things matter. People can tell when you're being vulnerable versus giving them a very blanketed statement and answer.
So, how do you enable that within the HR team itself? So, I think part of what you're talking about is almost like the HR leader working with the executive team to create fireside chats and create all these moments for transparency and forced vulnerability, let's call it. But then we want that to translate to managers. And by the way, you're right. What I said, if you Google, I don't know, you know, my manager experience, Reddit. I'm sure that's not going to be full of positive things, generally speaking, either. But how do you kind of scale that out a little bit? That to create that trust. Are there? It's you're not going to have fireside chats for every like manager, but there's some versions of that. And how do either business partners, or folks in HRGs, HR operations, like how do they kind of fit into this picture where you're trying to build the capacity or the capability of trust within the organization?
I think a lot of it, you gotta spend some one-on-one time with people. First, you within your HR team have to have that trust, right? You've gotta have your open conversations. Your team has to be able to ask you hard questions. You've gotta be able to be transparent with them because the truth in the matter is employees are gonna go to your HR business partners, not necessarily you. They're gonna go maybe to your talent acquisition person, not necessarily you. So you have to have that relationship with your team. And then from there, your team's role, HR's role as a whole is to support everyone in the organization. Those are our customers, the employees in the organization, the other managers in the organization. Those are our customers. And so supporting them with whatever they're bringing to the table in a way that is grounded, is authentic, coaching them through transitions if we're talking about change. And one of the most important things is making sure they understand the message as well, so that you're providing a consistent message as an HR team and as a leadership team. You have to have that within the organization. That messaging has to be the same. It's gotta be empathetic, it's gotta be clear, and your team has to understand that if they're gonna go out and help managers have similar conversations.
So I'd love to talk about something that like really intrigued me when we're talking about it in our prep call. The concept of micro promotions, something that you've experimented with, got going on. So Tell me a little bit more about the genesis of this idea, how you've been thinking about it, and how you've been implementing it within the organization.
Yeah. After a major reorganization, I think it's safe to say people are going to wonder, do I have a future at this company? What does it look like for me? And that is what my team, who they are just amazing because they also had to navigate through this change themselves and process everything. And while doing so, went really hard on what we call our career tracks and micro promotions. And though the idea behind those is to give people something concrete and tangible that they can work towards and measure themselves against. So the micro promotions, they're quick, meaningful wins. So moments of visible progress that they're making to keep them energized, keep them confident they're in the right place and moving in the right direction. It's a step between those bigger promotions and bigger role changes that they can get. And I wanna be fair, we haven't finished them. We are a small team like most HR teams, and so we've had to take a very deliberate approach and work quarter by quarter with different departments, but that's what we were doing is each quarter, we pick a department and we work with those people managers within the department. So, not just the department heads, we're working with the managers who are leading the individual contributors within the company, and we are tackling a department at a time.
So, tell me tangibly how this is different than a career ladder and promotion processes that that some to some level every mature organization has that. So, could you give us a little bit of the nuances there?
Yeah, so they are fairly similar. The way I like to think of the micro promotions and the career tracks tied to those is I'll use a software engineer as an example, right? You're looking at a job posting, you've got a junior software engineer, senior software engineer. It takes quite some time to typically make the jump from a junior to a mid-level and from a mid-level to a senior. So what the micro promotions have done for us internally is taken, say, the software engineer and broken it down into an SE1, an SE2, an SE3. So in between going from that mid-level to that senior, you've got very clear criteria within your review cycles, and you can set development plans to them and all that good stuff like every other organization does. But you've got these little steps along the way so that team members aren't going, okay, I just made software engineer at 4 years or whatever it is until I'm gonna have enough time under my belt and experience to become a senior. It's about giving them stepping stones along the way and something that they can work towards, so those short-term goals to hit that long-term goal.
You seem to mention the trigger for this kind of project to be at least partially driven by the to try to help focus in the energy around change right after a reorg to reduce the change, create more certainty. But I wonder if another source is just the changing demographics and expectations from the employees, where there's just more, maybe younger generations just want more reinforcement around on a higher cadence around what they're doing, and I don't know, just like up and looking around either across the org for opportunities or even just like in general, like much more often. Is that am I crazy or is that part of the equation here as well?
I think it's safe to say that wasn't the intention that we set it out with, but it's certainly a factor that's at play. You look at the workforce today, and it's certainly different than 10 years ago when I got started or when my parents were in the workforce and people stayed for 20 years or retired from places. The generation that has entered the workforce, I'll say just since COVID and even maybe a little bit before, they've had a lot of instant gratification. They've grown up with social media. They've grown up with smartphones and the ability to have something delivered to your house same day. And I do think that all, whether consciously or subconsciously, plays a role in whether it's the validation that we need or just this quicker gratification that as humans, like that's not tied to a specific generation, but as humans, with the development of all this technology, we've just come to be used to and a lot of people want. So I do think while it wasn't our intention, I do think that certainly has come into play and is a good reason to have the things like the micro promotions and the career tracks and give people some of those stepping stones because it's just the nature of the world we're living in.
This has been a fantastic conversation so far. If you haven't already done so, make sure to join our community. We're building a network of the most forward thinking HR and people operations professionals who are defining the future. I will personally be sharing news and ideas around how we can all thrive in the age of AI. You can find it at gocleary.com/Cleary-community. Now back to the show. Yeah, and I'm just brainstorming out loud. And I also wonder if these tighter feedback loops effectively around your career trajectory and like how far you're going, I wonder if that actually also enables a greater amount of internal mobility potentially. You're realizing faster that, wait, there's other opportunities within the organization that I might want to gravitate towards as I'm hearing about things. Yeah, I wonder if there's like a killer combo there, right? Where you people have like much faster feedback loops and also an understanding of what could come next, but then can also have combine that with some internal mobility programs where you can maintain retention of great talent in like different angles because of the clarity as well as availability if you put in that piece.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely think there's something there to it. We are working on this right now, but one of the things for my team quarterly is a shadowing program. So it's
Mm.
designed not necessarily to create like this mobility of I want to jump over here, but it could. So it's basically the idea is that someone will go, they'll fill out our form that triggers, hey, we've got someone who's wanting to shadow, and they are selecting the role that they're wanting to shadow within the organization. So we can partner with the managers and say, hey, we've got this person, they're wanting to shadow someone in customer success who would be a great person that we can pair them up with. Here's what they're looking to learn. And the main purpose behind that is really about developing the connections within the organization, making sure our people connected to different departments. You now have a friend over in customer success you can go talk to if you need something
You're
or
not the enemy. Yeah.
yeah, it's to develop these interdepartment connections because we all depend on each other. It doesn't matter what your role is within a
Mhm.
company. You are dependent on somebody. And when you have just that personal connection and relationship, I think you're a little bit more accountable because you're like, "Oh, yeah, Jen and I spent that day together, great person. I wanna help and I wanna get back with her on this, or I wanna go help on that customer problem." So it's really designed to help with engagement and bringing people together and connection, which is what we're really about. But on the flip side of that, it does also expose people to other positions within the organization. And I do think will spark some interest. Our support team, great example, is one of the places that we will promote people to different roles within the organization. And, they'll have the ability to go, I want to go sit with implementation or I want to go sit with customer success and just learn and connect. And maybe it's because they want to learn the product better or something specific, but it could also just be because they're interested in potentially going in that path. And now
Mhm.
it developed the connection there.
Yeah, it's yet another reason to have something like this. Now, the flip side is often is time, right? Just like creating time. There's budget pressure from across the board and delivery metrics, generally speaking, for almost like every org. And I'm curious from an HR or people team perspective, do you feel like you and your peers, most people listening, were being asked to do more with less today?
Yeah, I do think that is probably a fair statement, partially because technology has advanced so much. And I think that's where you have to figure out where can technology help you and where can you get efficient with things that are just time sucks. And maybe they're just more administrative so that you have the ability to focus on the things that really matter. And I think that's why it's also really important that your team have very clear priorities and that they understand what those are and that you're talking about those. Because I think that is sometimes where people slip or we get this feeling of, oh my gosh, I've got so much on my plate. I'm overwhelmed. And it's because we've held things maybe to a crunch time. And for HR and people leaders, and this is where HR can help coach in these areas, but it's really about making sure your team's goals are really clear, that they have a purpose that's tied to your company goals, and that you're talking about those things. Because if you're not talking about them, that's when things start to slip. And I think that's where this feeling sometimes, not all the times, comes from I've got too much to do with too little time is really are we prioritizing what matters most, and are we being efficient where we can be efficient? And I also think for HR leaders too, sometimes you got to delegate. You've hired a team hopefully, or you've got a couple people on your team, and coach them up, enable them, let them try new things, and where it makes sense, delegate, and don't take on this, "I have to do everything," or "I have to micromanage everything and be over everything that's happening." Like, you've built your team, and you've got to trust that they also are making the right decisions, and they know the goals, and you've gotta set them loose to grow a little bit, and I also think that helps in that area too.
So enablement of the team and well, like, empowerment of the team, and they can probably enable themselves. I think might be even like what you're arguing, but that's one piece of the equation. And another one that I often hear, I'd love your thoughts on this, is just that it's the more part. So the things that you need to do historically, the administrative work, benefits, comp, payroll, like just making sure you're just compliant,
Yeah.
that doesn't go away and it has to happen. And on top of that, with COVID, remote work policies coming back, all the whipsaws, you've kind of talked about it with M&A and, uh, you know, uh, restructures, rebrands. And then on top of that, we're probably adding some level of scope with the introduction of AI into the organization. So I think the challenge that's hard for folks to balance sometimes is like things don't go off the plate. It's just like things seem to keep adding up in some kind of way. So do you think broadly speaking, scope has just increased in 2026 versus 2019, like for the function? And if so, how do we manage that, even with a team, of course, and the right empowerment?
Like you said, the compliance, the benefits, and all that stuff, it doesn't go away. I think that's where if you don't have systems, get some systems that can help with that, that can help with the reporting and take what is the time suck of being compliant, not completely off your plate, but it's gonna help get you a long way there. Hey, AI, great example of it. It can help in that arena as well. And outside of that, I think some of it is having conversations with the C-suite, with your leaders. What are the things that matter most to your organization for your team to be working on? And if something isn't aligning with that, it's time to have a conversation of what comes off the plate. Because point, you can't just add on indefinitely without something coming off. And that's where I think have we voiced, hey, here is what's on the priority list right now. If we're going to add X onto this priority list, what do we want to deprioritize? And that doesn't mean you don't ever do it, but there are only so many hours in a day, and you have to be clear on your priorities. And if you have too much, that's where you have to go have the conversation. If you're in my position with your C suite on what is the most important thing for this organization, for the people within it that we get done.
Can you give me a little bit of insight that is critical on what's landed with the leadership team when you're talking about investments or rebalancing of priorities so that you can uh, kind of give your team the space to work on the right things? What uh, I think that's something where it's not the seat at the table conversation, but it's okay. Now we got the seat at the table, and we want to use our voice in the right direction and get the right amount of investment for the program that we're trying to run and execute on behalf of the organization. What kind of things have landed, and what's tough?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, like you said, you've got the seat at the table. I think it's really important because we always talk about HR having a seat at the table, and then are you using your seat at the table? You
Right.
were invited to the table for a reason. Are you speaking when you're at the table? And I think that is the really important part. So,
Mhm.
what lands, I think, is a few things. You again have to have transparency and trust within your leadership team, and everyone's got to understand what the company goals are, what the priorities are, and there has to be alignment there. I'm not saying agreement because not everyone's going to agree on what the goal is or what the priority is, but you have to have alignment so that everyone knows what we are working towards. So that's important because everything else, if you don't have that, it's not going to matter. Then I think as HR leaders, you've got to have the business fluency. And I don't just mean, oh, how do we make money? Yeah, that's a component of it, but who is your product servicing? How is it sold? What is important to your customers? Do you understand the culture really within the organization and how teams are feeling? Do you know what's happening with your counterparts, different departments? How close are you to the tech organization?
Mm.
Are you having conversations with the product team? Like, you have to understand those things and ask questions around those different areas, and when you do, I think it's a lot easier when you speak up and say something or have a question or push back to be taken more seriously because you have invested. You have invested in those departments. You've invested in understanding your organization and have business fluency. And so your seat at the table, it becomes your responsibility to speak up. And if you're not, then you're not doing what you should be doing as a leader in the organization because you were invited to the table for a reason, and you then have to use that seat.
That's very well put. So then, do you think there is, and across your peer set, would you say right now we're at a moment where people have the invitation is there to the table, and then it's just not being leveraged in the right way with the speaking up versus you also hear about like organizations where there's a CHRO in place because the team kind of needs someone there. They've never really experienced what good looks like, and you're just looking for someone to hire a bunch of folks or just do the administrative work. And I'm just going into more detail of just saying when what not really having a seat at the table could look like, right?
Yeah, and that's fair. I think there are a lot of people I see it sometimes with, like, founder-led companies who maybe they come in and they get some investment into it, and now they're being directed, to your point, "You gotta go hire your HR
Right.
heads." They do it not knowing, "Okay, what is this HR person really gonna do for me?" There's a couple of things. I would say first, the mistake that can be made with that is they go and hire someone in HR who's maybe not very seasoned. That can be an issue because then you have the person that's just gonna come in and to no fault of their own, they're gonna do what they're reporting into the CEO, what the CEO is telling them to do, because that's what the job is. So I think first and foremost, it's making sure you're hiring the right level of HR person that can come in and show you what good looks like. And I do think hopefully CEOs, I think they're smart enough to know what good doesn't look like if they get that and it's in the seat. But there's a component of when you're at the C-suite, executive level, even director and above, I would say, where if you're working with leaders who maybe haven't partnered with HR before, that's where you take them on the journey of what you can do. So instead of maybe taking orders, if you will, of what HR used to be perceived as several years ago, compliance, hiring, payroll, like that sort of thing, you've gotta build the trust with the person. You've got to understand what their needs are and develop that personal relationship, which is, hey, what we're really good at, we're people. So that's kind of the easy part. But
Right.
then you have to show them what you can help them with and show them, hey, if we do this within your team, look at the engagement driver that's having, look at their productivity that's increasing, or maybe they don't know how to have tough conversations. And so that is a coaching session that you're giving them. But I think as leaders in the HR space, we have to show them what good looks like and maybe what they're missing out on if they're not utilizing us to the full capability. And so there's a component of we have to speak up and show them what good looks like if they've never had good or maybe they've just never had HR before.
Okay, so then similar to a board asking the founder to hire an HR person for the first time, where they're just saying, like, well, I've got to do this. Let's say, hypothetical here, the board just saying, hey, we need to invest in AI. We need to go at this and make it a thing. I think there's some version of that's like happening in like many organizations. Maybe there's some are more thought through or in terms of like a particular strategy. But how do you think about this where in some ways it's like a tool, and so all you see are nails everywhere, like, it's a hammer, so there it is, so we gotta go for all the nails, but in your experience, what has been like that AI kind of strategy, both at the company level and also, like, for your organization, for your
Yeah.
function?
I think you're right on a lot of boards mandating this AI thing because it's all anyone is hearing about. You turn on the news, you hear AI.
Right.
You anyone in tech, you hear AI. So I think it's a fair statement that in the world, a lot of companies are being asked or told go build something, get AI within your organizations. And, the way that we approached this was as a leadership team coming together and breaking down into kind of 3 buckets what AI can do across an organization. And that's not unique to us, but you've got your just administrative tasks, right? Drafting comms, helping with the emails, things of that nature, like very operational, not really crazy proprietary stuff. Then you've got AI that can help build product. And then there's the other component of AI that can write code and things of that nature. And what we had to do, and what I think every company has to do, is you've got to figure out what you are okay with and what you're going to allow as you're dipping your toes into the space of AI and what is not okay. And we developed an AI policy around it. We had tools that were approved and tools that were not approved to be used within the organization and training those people on them and making sure they know where to go to find that and who to reach out to if they have a new tool that they want to try out. But you got to know what parameters you're operating within. And if companies are not doing that, the risk is that you've got people within your company that are using AI that you don't know about, and you don't know what AI they're using and what they're putting into it.
The I guess alignment and governance is pretty important. But then if you take some of these, what you've started to see, and let's focus in on the people team and and talk a little bit about the function as we close out here. What do you think? Where do you think things are going to land? Like, what do you? If I just asking you about the how HR changes in the age of AI, what do you think future-proof HR function looks like?
Yeah, so what I will say is I don't think AI is going to replace HR. You cannot have human resources without the human component to it. What AI will do, and I think can do for those of us who really embrace it, is amplify our impact within our organizations because it's helping us accelerate things that often take a lot of time.
Okay.
Think about starting something new that you've not done or building a training resource. You can use AI to get through that blank page hard part of getting started and utilize your time where it really matters, which is making sure that the work that you're doing is the stuff that's the most important to the organization, that it's got the human touch that it needs, that it's fitting to your company's culture and language and tone. And AI can't completely do that. It can help and it can really accelerate things for you. But where I see it is as a tool for a department who, through most organizations, operates pretty lean. It's gonna help amplify our impact if we can learn to use it and learn to use it really well.
Yeah, to your point, it's already pretty lean, right? So that's the reality. So in some ways, because of that history, right, for the function, it's just going to be like a future HR function in terms of ratio and employee to HR team might be similar, but you're just their day to day and how people are leveraging tools could be quite different, right?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think it's gonna expand the things that we are able to do, and I think do them faster and do them better, and to your point earlier of doing more with less, I think it helps us do more with the same or less in some cases, but I think that is really the impact that AI can have because we're already so lean that it just helps do the things that are really important that are the things our companies want us to be doing, right? Like, they don't want us spending time doing administrative tasks and working on compliance. Those have to be done. They want us to do them and make sure we're not uncompliant.
That was my point. It doesn't go away. It's just you're
Uh,
stacking on top.
but they want us to really be helping shape the organization and the culture and guiding it and course correcting. And so finding ways to use AI that allows you to focus the bulk of your time on those things, I think that's where the real opportunity is for us.
So do you think that more is more like in the doing more with less, right? Is that more that's going to be enabled kind of like more of the same in that hire more people or engage better or do the same kind of things? Or actually is it more in a difference in kind? Like there's new types of things that like the function is really not being asked to do today or doesn't even like is not even maybe considered part of the remit. Do you imagine any kind of scope expansion because of all this? Or is just like you're able to just hire better, retain better, run all your programs better that we're already doing with the same number of people.
Yeah, I think it's certainly that, right? Because AI is being built into the systems that we're using to give us better data insights quicker without having to dig and sift through everything to decipher it ourselves. Yet still need to go sense check and all of those things. So I do really think it helps us amplify our impact there. And then, hey, will it bring in things that maybe we're not seeing right now? I think it'd be silly to say no. That's the nature of what every role I think has been for as long as time. So I don't think I'd be surprised if something else came into HR's remit because AI has become a thing now. What it is, I don't know. But I think, it's exciting actually to think about, and I certainly wouldn't be surprised.
It's an exciting time indeed. We can see what the future can bring us, but if we have, I guess, this pairing of the right tools with the right agility, mentality, and I guess enablement of a full on HR team, you can consider yourself a little bit more bulletproof, future proof for whatever that could look like. But certainly, there's a lot more of what we're already doing today, right? That there's much more demand already from than we have the capacity to provide. So let's look at it that way. Thank you for this conversation, Jen. It's been really interesting to kind of pair some of these big moments of disruption that so many companies have gone through. We went through your experience, whether it's M&A or on the other side, reorgs, but then taking those lessons into this new AI era. There's a lot of change management that overlaps with that, but then there's also some unique things that new challenges that we're all working through. So thanks for sharing your experience and thoughts about this. And for everyone out there who has been following along, I hope this conversation has been helpful as you're thinking about future proofing your own organizations and your own HR functions. And thanks once again to Jennifer for joining me on this conversation.
Right. Thanks, Thomas. It was great to be here.
Absolutely. All right. See you on the next one. Bye now. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Future Proof HR. If you like the discussion, make sure you leave us a 5-star review on the platform you're listening to or watching us on. Or share this with a friend or colleague who may find value in the message. See you next time as we keep our pulse on how we can all thrive in the age of AI. Hey, it's Thomas again. One quick question before you go. Are you and your HR team tired of answering the same employee questions again and again in Slack? If yes, our Cleary AI powered Slack bot is here to help. It takes routine employee requests and answers it automatically while freeing up time for you to take on more important tasks. At the same time, it automatically builds up an HR knowledge base as you go. It's quick to set up, works right in Slack, and you can try it for free. Just head on over to gocleary.com/HR-chatbot to install it. It's again, gocleary.com/HR-chatbot. Thanks again.